What if the most powerful pharmacy for managing blood sugar wasn't found in a drugstore, but in the wild, windswept lands of the American Great Basin, lands that the Shoshone people have called home for thousands of years? The Shoshone, known as the Newe, meaning simply the people, inhabited the rugged terrain of present-day Nevada, Idaho, Utah, and Wyoming. In this harsh, semi-arid environment, they developed one of the most sophisticated relationships with plants in the entire indigenous world. For them, food was medicine, and medicine was food. Today, modern science is beginning to catch up to what Shoshone healers observed for generations. Researchers are discovering that many of the plants used in traditional Great Basin medicine contain real, measurable compounds that help the body manage blood glucose, reduce inflammation, improve insulin sensitivity, and support metabolic health. In this video, we're going to explore 20 plants rooted in Shoshone ethnobotanical tradition, and we'll look at what science has actually found about each one. Please stay until the end for our important medical disclaimer. None of these plants replace your prescribed medication or your doctor's guidance. This is educational content honoring an incredible tradition of natural healing. Let's begin. Diabetes is one of the most pressing health challenges of our time, affecting over 500 million people worldwide. But long before modern medicine defined it, indigenous people around the world observed and treated the symptoms we now associate with this condition: excessive thirst, fatigue, slow wound healing, and metabolic imbalance. The Shoshone people lived in one of the most ecologically diverse regions of North America. Their territory stretched from the Great Basin Desert to the foothills of the Rocky Mountains, an environment that gifted them with dozens of powerful medicinal plants, many of which have now been studied in modern laboratories. Ethnobotanist Daniel E. Moorman, in his landmark book Native American Ethnobotany, documented hundreds of plant uses by Great Basin tribes, including the Shoshone. When you cross-reference those traditional uses with current scientific literature, the overlap is fascinating. Let's go through all 20 plants, one by one. Plant 1. Prickly pear cactus, Opuntia polyacantha. The prickly pear was a staple food and medicine for Great Basin tribes, including the Shoshone. The pads, called cladodes, were eaten roasted or boiled. The fruit was consumed fresh or dried as a food source throughout the year. What science says, this is perhaps the most scientifically validated plant on our entire list. The pads of prickly pear cactus contain soluble fiber and pectin, which slow glucose absorption in the gut. Multiple studies, including research reviewed by Clemson University's Home and Garden Information Center, have confirmed that the cladodes produce an acute hypoglycemic effect in people with type 2 diabetes, typically observed within 3 hours of ingestion. Some research even suggests the plant may stimulate pancreatic beta cells to increase insulin production. Importantly, the fruit alone does not have this effect. The blood sugar benefit comes specifically from the pads. Plant 2. Big sagebrush, Artemisia tridentata. Sagebrush is arguably the most iconic plant of Shoshone territory. The Shoshone used leaf and seed preparations for respiratory ailments, digestive issues, and as a general tonic. A tea brewed from the leaves was one of the most commonly prepared remedies across the Great Basin. What science says? Artemisia species are well studied for their metabolic effects. Research published in ethnopharmacology journals has identified anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, and mild hypoglycemic properties in Artemisia extracts. Oxidative stress and chronic inflammation are key drivers of insulin resistance, and sagebrush's active compounds, including camphor, cineol, and various flavonoids, directly address both. Most evidence is preclinical, but the direction is consistent and promising. Plant 3. Juniper, Juniperus osteosperma. The Shoshone and neighboring Paiute tribes used juniper extensively throughout the Great Basin. Teas from the leaves and berries were prepared for rheumatism, respiratory ailments, and general detoxification. It is documented among Shoshone plant uses at multiple ethnobotanical research institutions. What science says? Juniperus communis berries have been studied for antidiabetic activity in peer-reviewed research. A 2014 study in the Journal of Medicinal Food found that juniper berry extract significantly reduced blood glucose levels in diabetic animal models. The berries contain terpenes, flavonoids, and chromium, a mineral that plays a direct role in insulin receptor sensitivity. The traditional use of juniper as a kidney tonic also aligns with the importance of renal health and diabetes management, since diabetic nephropathy is a leading complication of the disease. Plant 4. Bitterroot, Luisia rediviva. Bitterroot was a critical food and medicine plant for the eastern and northern Shoshone. The root was harvested, dried, and consumed as a staple carbohydrate source. It is specifically documented in the ethnobotanical literature on Wind River Reservation Shoshone, published in Ethnobiology Letters in 2020. What science says? Louisa root is high in starch and complex carbohydrates with a naturally low glycemic profile when prepared in traditional ways, dried, then slowly rehydrated and cooked. A diet built on low glycemic whole foods is foundational to blood sugar management. The bitter compounds in the root may also stimulate bile production, which supports fat metabolism, a key factor in type 2 diabetes, where fat dysregulation and insulin resistance go hand in hand. Plant 5. Black hawthorn, Crataegus douglasii. Documented by the Native Memory Project, the Shoshone added hawthorn berries, flowers, and sometimes leaves to food as both nutrition and preventive medicine. It was part of the everyday food as medicine philosophy central to Shoshone life. What science says? Hawthorn berries are rich in oligomeric proanthocyanidins and quercetin, two powerful antioxidants. Research published in Phytotherapy Research found that hawthorn extracts demonstrate alpha-glucosidase inhibitory activity, meaning they slow the breakdown of complex carbohydrates into glucose, a mechanism almost identical to the diabetes drug acarbose. Beyond blood sugar, hawthorn is one of the most well-studied plants for cardiovascular support, which matters greatly since cardiovascular disease is the leading cause of death among people with diabetes. Plant 6. Yarrow, Achillea millefolium. The Shoshone used yarrow tea for fevers and detoxification. Documented at Weber State University's Ethnobotany archives, the whole plant was used, the tea helping to expel toxins and induce beneficial perspiration. It was a trusted, widely used remedy. What science says? Yarrow contains quercetin and multiple other flavonoids with well-documented anti-inflammatory and antioxidant properties. Chronic low-grade inflammation is one of the most important root drivers of insulin resistance. Animal studies have shown yarrow extracts to modestly reduce fasting blood glucose. While human clinical trials are still limited, yarrow's anti-inflammatory profile makes it highly relevant to metabolic health. Plant 7. Dandelion, Taraxacum officinal. While originally European, dandelion was rapidly adopted into Great Basin indigenous medicine after its introduction to North America. Shoshone and neighboring tribes used it as a bitter tonic to support liver and digestive function, a role it has played in traditional medicine systems around the world. What science says? Dandelion contains inulin, a prebiotic fiber that feeds beneficial gut bacteria and has been shown in multiple studies to help improve insulin sensitivity. A 2016 study in evidence-based complementary and alternative medicine found that dandelion extracts inhibited both alpha-glucosidase and alpha-amylase enzymes, slowing the rate at which the body absorbs sugar from food. Dandelion root also supports liver function, which is central to glucose regulation through glycogen storage and release. Plant 8. Wild rose hips, Rosa woodsii. Wild rose hips were gathered as a nutritious food source across the Great Basin. The Shoshone consumed the hips fresh and dried throughout the seasons, using them as both food and general wellness support. What science says? Rose hips are extraordinarily rich in vitamin C, a nutrient that has been shown in clinical studies to reduce fasting blood glucose and HbA1c in type 2 diabetes patients when supplemented consistently. They also contain tyroside, a compound studied for its ability to improve insulin sensitivity by activating ppA receptors in fat tissue. A study published in the European Journal of Clinical Nutrition found rosehip powder reduced blood sugar levels in obese individuals. This is a plant that is both a traditional food and a scientifically credible blood sugar ally. Plant 9. Broadleaf plantain, Plantago major. Broadleaf plantain is documented extensively in Shoshone ethnobotany. The leaves were used as poultices for wounds, and tea was prepared for internal complaints, including digestive issues. The Shoshones made a tea and used the whole plant for battle bruises and wounds, as recorded in ethnobotanical sources. What science says? Plantain seeds, commercially known as psyllium, are widely recognized in conventional medicine as a soluble fiber that slows glucose absorption and lowers post-meal blood sugar spikes. The leaves themselves contain orcubin, an anti-inflammatory compound. Studies on Plantago major extracts have shown hypoglycemic effects in animal models. The seeds have been used in multiple human clinical trials for blood sugar and cholesterol management with consistent, positive results. Plant 10. Canadian goldenrod, Solidago canadensis. The Native Memory Project describes goldenrod as a perfect example of food as medicine for the Shoshone. Both a food source and a medicinal herb, it was integrated into daily life in a way that reflects the Shoshone's holistic approach to health. What science says? Goldenrod contains rutin and quercetin, two flavonoids with well-documented antidiabetic properties. Research published in peer-reviewed journals has found goldenrod extracts to demonstrate alpha-glucosidase inhibition and kidney protective effects. Since diabetic nephropathy is one of the most serious long-term complications of diabetes, goldenrod's dual role as a blood sugar modulator and kidney tonic is particularly significant. Plant 11. Piñon pine nuts, Pinus monophylla. Pine nuts were the single most important staple food of the Western Shoshone. Annual pine nut harvests were central cultural and survival events. The nutritious seeds were eaten raw, ground into flour, and used in soups, forming the backbone of the Shoshone winter diet. What science says? This is where traditional Shoshone wisdom and cutting-edge pharmacology meet in a striking way. Pine nuts are rich in monounsaturated fats, magnesium, and phenolenic acid. Magnesium deficiency is strongly and consistently linked to insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes in the scientific literature. Phenolenic acid has been studied for its ability to suppress appetite and reduce post-meal glucose levels. A 2009 study found that pine nut oil stimulates the release of the appetite-suppressing hormone CCK and GLP-1, the exact same hormone pathway targeted by today's most popular diabetes and weight loss medications. The Shoshone built their diet around this food for thousands of years. Plant 12. Mormon tea or ephedra viridis. The Shoshone, Paiute, and Navajo all used ephedra viridis, known as Mormon tea, to brew an herbal beverage. Documented at Red Butte Gardens' Native American Ethnobotany program, it was actually Native Americans in the region who first taught early settlers how to prepare this tea. What science says? It is important to note that ephedra viridis, the North American green Mormon tea, is fundamentally different from ephedra sinica, the Asian mahuang that contains high levels of ephedrine alkaloids. The North American species has minimal alkaloid content and is considered generally safe as a brewed tea. Research on ephedra viridis indicates antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties. Its traditional use as an energizing tonic is relevant because chronic fatigue is a hallmark symptom of poorly managed blood sugar. As always, if you have a heart condition, consult your doctor before use. Plant 13. Cattail, Typha latifolia. Cattail was a critical multi-use plant for Shoshone bands who lived near waterways and wetlands. The roots, shoots, and pollen were all consumed as food. The roots were dried and ground into a nutritious starchy flour, a major caloric staple. What science says? Cattail root flour has a more moderate glycemic impact compared to refined wheat flour, making it a friendlier grain alternative for blood sugar management. It is also high in resistant starch, a type of carbohydrate that bypasses digestion in the small intestine, ferments in the colon, and feeds healthy gut bacteria. Gut microbiome health is now recognized by modern medicine as a major factor in type 2 diabetes risk and management. The Shoshone were eating resistant starch long before scientists had a name for it. Plant 14. Bitterbrush or antelope brush, Persia tridentata. Bitterbrush was used by Great Basin tribes, including the Shoshone, as a medicinal tea for fevers and general internal cleansing. The plant grows abundantly across Shoshone territory and was a well-known remedy. What science says? Persia species contain bitter-ditapene compounds. Bitter compounds are a growing area of diabetes research. Scientists have discovered that bitter taste receptors called TAS2RS are located not just on the tongue, but also in the gut and pancreas, where they appear to stimulate insulin secretion and regulate glucose metabolism. While direct human clinical studies on bitterbrush specifically are limited, the bitter compound mechanism is one of the most exciting new frontiers in metabolic medicine, and the Shoshone were using it intuitively. Plant 15. Sweetgrass, Hierochlorherta ssp. herta. Northern sweetgrass holds deep cultural significance for the Eastern Shoshone. It is specifically documented in the 2020 peer-reviewed Ethnobotany study published in Ethnobiology Letters on Wind River Reservation plants, where both Eastern Shoshone and Northern Arapaho tribal members identified and named this plant in their indigenous language. What science says? Sweetgrass contains coumarin and related compounds with anti-inflammatory and mild blood glucose modulating effects documented in research. But there is another dimension here worth noting. Sweetgrass is central to Shoshone ceremony and spiritual practice. Emerging research on the mind-body connection is highly relevant. Cortisol, the stress hormone, is a well-established trigger of elevated blood sugar. Healing practices, ceremony, and community connection that reduce chronic stress may have real, measurable physiological benefits for metabolic health. Plant 16. Wild onion, Allium textile. Wild onions grew abundantly across Shoshone territory and were harvested as both food and medicine. They were eaten raw and cooked, and used as a general health tonic. Allium plants have been independently used as medicine by indigenous cultures on nearly every continent. What science says? Allium species, onion, garlic, and their wild relatives, are among the most thoroughly researched plants for blood sugar management in the world. They contain allicin, quercetin, and organosulfur compounds shown to improve insulin sensitivity, lower fasting blood glucose, and reduce HbA1c. A study published in Environmental Health Insights found that onion extract significantly reduced fasting blood glucose in diabetic animal models. The anti-diabetic mechanisms of allium plants are well established across multiple species and multiple research groups. This is one of the strongest plant categories on our list. Plant 17. Serviceberry, Amelanchier alnifolia. Serviceberries were one of the most beloved and widely used food plants of the Great Basin and Northern Plains tribes. The Shoshone dried them, ate them fresh, and incorporated them into pemmican, a highly nutritious, long-lasting food. They were harvested in abundance during summer and stored for winter. What science says? Serviceberries are among the highest antioxidant-containing berries in North America, packed with anthocyanins, the same class of compounds extensively studied in blueberries for their role in diabetes management. Research consistently shows that anthocyanins improve insulin sensitivity, reduce post-meal blood glucose spikes, and protect pancreatic beta cells from oxidative damage. The high fiber content of serviceberries also contributes to slower, more stable glucose absorption. This traditional Shoshone food is a nutritional powerhouse. Plant 18. Yellow dock, Rumex crispus. Yellow dock root was used medicinally by the Shoshone. Documented in Shoshone Ethnobotany archives at Weber State University, the roots were the primary medicinal part, prepared as decoctions for internal use. What science says? Yellow dock root is rich in anthraquinones, tannins, and notably high in iron, a mineral that influences metabolic function and energy production. Research published in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology has found Rumex species to demonstrate antihyperglycemic activity in preclinical studies. Yellow dock also supports liver function and bile production, important in regulating cholesterol and fat metabolism, both of which are significantly dysregulated in type 2 diabetes. Plant 19. Balsam root, wild sunflower, Balsam orhiza sagittata. Balsam root was one of the most important plants in the traditional Shoshone diet. The seeds were ground into flour, the young shoots and tender roots were eaten, and the roots were used medicinally for a range of ailments. Archaeological analysis of ancient Native American diets, reported by NBC News, specifically identified wild sunflower seed flour as a staple component of the ancestral desert Southwest diet. What science says? Balsam root contains sesquiterpene lactones with anti-inflammatory properties. Its seeds are high in inulin-type fructans, the same prebiotic fiber found in chicory root that improves gut microbiome health and insulin sensitivity. The seeds are also high in healthy fats and fiber that slow glucose absorption. Researchers studying ancient indigenous diets have noted that this high-fiber, seed-based dietary pattern may explain why modern Native Americans, who shifted away from traditional foods, face disproportionately high rates of type 2 diabetes. The food itself was protective. Plant 20. Silver buffalo berry, Shepherdea argentea. Documented by the Native Memory Project as a core part of traditional Shoshone plant knowledge, silver buffalo berry was consumed as an important food. The Native Memory Project notes that when cooked, it is very high in phenolic antioxidants, knowledge the Shoshone held long before modern nutritional science could measure it. What science says? Silver buffalo berry is one of the richest natural sources of lycopene among all North American berries, a remarkable fact that modern science has only recently confirmed. Lycopene has been shown in multiple studies to reduce oxidative stress in pancreatic tissue and improve insulin secretion. A 2015 study published in the Journal of Nutritional Biochemistry found that lycopene supplementation significantly improved blood glucose control in diabetic animal models. The extraordinary antioxidant load of buffalo berry makes it a genuinely powerful functional food for metabolic support. There you have it, 20 plants deeply rooted in Shoshone tradition, each with a scientifically documented reason to be taken seriously when it comes to blood sugar support and metabolic health. Let's do a quick recap of what makes this list so remarkable. Prickly pear cactus pads have clinically confirmed hypoglycemic effects. Juniper berries contain chromium and terpenes that directly support insulin receptor sensitivity. Wild rose hips carry vitamin C and tyroside, both linked to improved HbA1c in human studies. Piñon pine nuts activate GLP-1 pathways, the exact same mechanism targeted by today's most popular diabetes medications. Broadleaf plantain seeds are scientifically recognized for slowing glucose absorption. Wild onion relatives have proven antidiabetic mechanisms, studied across the world. Savisberry anthocyanins protect the very pancreatic beta cells that produce insulin. And buffalo berry delivers lycopene at levels rarely found in any berry on earth. Every single one of these plants was used by the Shoshone people not as a last resort, but as everyday, integrated food as medicine wisdom passed down through generations. The Shoshone teaching that food is medicine is not a poetic saying. It is a practical, nutritional philosophy that modern science is validating, study by study, compound by compound. If you found this video valuable, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us continue bringing you well-researched content that honors traditional wisdom and bridges it with modern science. Medical disclaimer. This video is for educational and informational purposes only. The plants discussed have traditional uses and have been studied scientifically. However, none of them are proven cures for diabetes, and none should ever replace your prescribed medication, insulin therapy, or your doctor's medical advice. Type 1 diabetes requires insulin therapy. Type 2 diabetes management requires individualized medical care. Some herbal compounds can interact with diabetes medications and may cause blood sugar to drop dangerously low. Always consult your licensed healthcare provider before adding any herbal supplement to your routine. The information shared here honors indigenous botanical knowledge and is intended to inspire curiosity, respect, and further conversation with qualified health professionals.